Okay, to get us started, since nobody's lining up in the room, evidently all the presentations were so thorough that folks here in the room don't have any questions. Now they're lining up. Let me go ahead and get an online question. I know we have a lot of those, please.
The first online question is during Chris Andre's presentation. Are there any fees associated with the meeting and review process?
No, there's no fees associated with submitting a pre-ANDA meeting request.
Hey, I love those that are nice and short. Microphone number 2, step up nice and close to the microphone for me, please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I have a question for Chris about the CDER direct submission of control correspondences. In future, is it required to have an ANDA number before submitting control correspondence?
No, it's not required at this time to have a pre-assigned ANDA number for control correspondence.
Thank you.
Okay, another nice easy one. Right over here, nice and close to the microphone for me.
I have a question regarding the portal. If two individuals within an organization have logged into the portal and have access, can each individual see all the meeting requests submitted by the other, right? We're each submitting meeting requests and we'd like to see the full list.
At this time you can't, but this is something that we're working on. We realize there's some challenges with multiple people needing to access the same projects within the portal, and so at this time, no, but it's something that we're working on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and again, if you have a question, please go up to the microphones because the people online need to be able to hear you. Let's take an online question, please.
This came in during Dr. All's presentation. I think maybe Dr. Lineberger might be able to help us out with this. Do we need to file different applications for complex generics?
No, the complex generics are the same 505J ANDA application, so it's not there's not a separate application process for complex generics.
All right, microphone number 1, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, just make more clear what difference between like a combination product, a complex product, and even like impurity for a drug.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I just want to make clear what difference between combination like products or drug and the complex products or drug, or even compare with the impurity drug.
All right, so I'm not sure about the final phrase about impurities. I'll answer the first section of the question, is that there's a set of products that are combination products. That's a set that doesn't, some combination products are not considered complex products by the GDUFA 2 commitment letter, but some are. So there's a set of ANDAs that would be considered combination products. There's a set of guidances, rules, office, and we're having a separate workshop on the combination products in October if you're interested in that, which will go into a lot more detail. What are the definitions? What are the frameworks around combination products? In the commitment letter, it talks about a subset of combination products that are complex combination products. And those, as mentioned in the commitment letter and as mentioned today, are ones that often have user interface, different, potential user interface differences that need to be considered during development. You'll hear more about them in for example, in the inhalation area. And those are combination products that are also considered complex products at which you would engage with us through the pre-NDA meeting process.
So between like impurity or separate them,
impurities are a separate, separate issue. Every ANDA that is submitted, you have to address the impurities. That's part of the standard pharmaceutical quality evaluation of every product. So is that your question? So I wasn't really clear what you were asking about impurities.
So as a drug, many devices in there. So we say the drug is impurity, or a drug composed by the meaningful maybe active compounds with another device. So finally the drug is called purity or impurity. So how separate them?
How to determine what's an impurity and what's the active ingredient? Is that your question?
Yeah.
I mean, so for the generic drug program, I think every generic product has to reference an approved product. So at the time that product is approved, FDA clearly indicates what the, if you go to our Orange Book, it indicates what's the active ingredient for every product that can be the basis of submission for an ANDA. So if you want to know what the active ingredient is,
Okay.
you can,
Makes sense.
that's
Thank you.
generally determined when the new drug product is approved.
Moving on to microphone number 2, nice and close for me, please.
Hi, good morning. Just questions about nasal spray suspension product. I know that the inhalation is a complex product, generic and also combination. Is nasal spray suspension nasal spray is a combination product? I know it's a complex, but is it a combination product?
So we have a separate session on the inhalation nasal products. You can ask those particular questions, but nasal spray suspension products generally are considered complex products by GDUFA 2.
So, my question is whether it's a combination product or not.
Generally it has a delivery device. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yes, they'll be.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a good preview to come back tomorrow when we cover those in more details. Let's take an online question, and then we'll come back here to the microphone. Online.
This came in during Dr. Zhang's presentation. I would like to know if the list of PSGs that are under development is available on the FDA website.
A very good question. Actually, in response to the GAO report, FDA is in the planning of publicize the PSG, especially for those complex products under development on our website. So we're going to communicate that to the public when it's available in the future.
All right, microphone number 1, nice and close for me, please.
If the RLD has changed its formulation or its labeling after FDA has provided some recommendations or advice from a pre-ANDA meeting, what's the process then for either FDA updating that information accordingly, maybe in coordination with OND, or does that require a separate meeting request to sort of address those changes?
Respond, as a ANDA applicant or developing toward an application, it's your responsibility to monitor the reference product for changes that affect that. So when you come in for a pre-NDA meeting, you'll get discussion based on what's the current reference listed drug. When you file your application, it's based on what the current reference listed drug is. So you have to constantly be aware that changes to the reference product may affect your ANDA throughout the development and approval process. So that's we do update when significant changes happen. We do update product-specific guidances. For example, if there's a change that may impact what bioequivalent studies are recommended, that will generally be updated through a product-specific guidance. But there's a lot of responsibility that goes on the applicant to be, as you're developing your labeling, you have to do that as part of your development. So there's a lot of responsibilities that the applicant has to monitor and understand the reference product for a particular application. But the meeting will be on the reference product as it is when you have the meeting.
So that means you do another meeting request, right?
And so it depends what the change is and what the question and what the there's sometimes there's small changes, sometimes there's labeling changes, indication changes that generally wouldn't affect but you have to be monitoring those and say if there is something that significantly changed in the product, then you have to consider whether you need to send in a control correspondence, a meeting request, or consider that in your development product, consider that in what your the batches that you're selecting for your pivotal bioequivalent study are. So there's a lot of considerations that are really up to the applicant to consider in that situation if there are changes. And then you can decide if you might want to use a control correspondence to say, oh, this has changed, and ask a specific question about that during the development process. So it might not be something that would raise to the level of a meeting.
Next, come on, nice and close to the microphone for me.
Good morning, and thank you for the panel members for the informative presentations, but I still do have a couple of questions.
You get one.
Okay, one question, but mine is a two-part question. One is...
Oh, she's buying desserts at lunch, okay?
My question is about the mid-review cycle meetings. And, under GDUFA 2, we've been receiving disciplinary DRL letters indicating some of the disciplines are adequate completed, no further comments. And would the agency allow us to have a meeting for a mid-review cycle for the discipline that is still under review? That's my first question, because since other disciplines are adequate, is an opportunity for a sponsor to request for that. Second is, if
Yeah, let's pause for the first one. Go ahead.
This is still under the paradigm, assuming that you have had a product development or a pre-submission meeting. Is that correct? Because so the mid-cycle review meetings are for those that have had a pre-submission or product development meeting for a complex product. Those are the folks that get the mid-cycle meeting.
Okay.
And it can focus on the discipline.
Okay. So if one discipline is still pending review, is there any opportunity for those meetings? Such as OPQ may be still under review and our GDUFA goal date maybe 3-4 months down the road, and just to understand whether that is going to be a complete review, or are there any questions during the review can be responded by the sponsor during the review meeting.
So during your GDUFA, so hopefully during your GDUFA 2 ANDAs, you should be getting mid-cycle feedback from all the disciplines.
Okay.
Right, and so that's the expectation for every application, not just the complex products. For the complex products, once you've gotten that mid-cycle feedback, which is part of the commitment, then you have an additional opportunity for communication. So I don't really understand the basis of your question to say if you don't get mid-cycle, like that's part of our.
When do we get all the discipline review letters?
I mean, I encourage you to read the GDUFA 2 commitment letter to understand what you'll be getting.
That wasn't very clear.
And for the mid-cycle meetings, like as Chris said, the RPM for the application will reach out to you to schedule that meeting. Right, so.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and take an online question, please.
This occurred during Chris's presentation. Can we resubmit a denied application after making corrections?
So, yes, but let me rephrase that a little bit. During your denial, in your denial letter, you will get specific recommendations on how to, if it's, you'll get recommendations on what to include in your meeting package to have a better chance of getting a meeting accepted. So yes, you can submit a new meeting request after you've received a denial for the same product with adding the additional information that's been requested from the denial letter.
Okay, microphone number 1, nice and close for me, please.
Hi, my question is for Chris. It's an administrative question. If an organization has different entities with different DUNS number, can one user ID access can submit the pre-ANDA meeting request for all the entities?
So this is something that we're still working on at this point, that right now each of the users need to have their own user ID in order to submit different meeting requests. Right.
So sometimes an organization has one applicant name under different DUNS number. There will be one applicant and one user ID having the same mail ID and the password. Can they submit the meeting request for all the entities?
Yes, one person can submit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, another online question, please.
This came in during once the panel started answering questions. Can we submit controlled correspondences and pre-ANDA meetings requests for the same product at the same time for 2 different types of questions?
We generally try to discourage having pre-ANDA meeting requests and controlled correspondence in at the same time for the same product, and would prefer that question that's in the control correspondence be wrapped into your meeting package as part of it, so that you have a single correspondence method in at the same time.
Okay, nice and close, please.
Yeah, so if the applicant selected an RLD, but their product is a levosold form of the RLD, and they're experiencing less side effects of the versus what the RLD has reported in their labeling. So when you say sameness of labeling, does the agency allow modification of that generic product's label to incorporate additional information?
Application specific question, so I think that's more
Okay.
appropriately addressed through through an appropriate regulatory process. There's
Okay.
not a
Thank you. Sorry.
appropriate question for this form. It seems to be about a specific product.
Oh, and I forgot that part of my rules. If you have something specific to a review that's under review by the agency right now, the panel cannot give you those answers. You need to talk to your RPM and the review team. Got about 10 more minutes. If there's questions, please line up over here. Oh, back again. There's no line. You get
I cannot ask two
All right.
questions at one time, so I have to come again. Is biosimilar product as part of the complex product, or we need to go a different path for asking any questions for the biosimilar products?
This is about generic drug 505
Okay,
B2,
so no biosimilar.
505J submission. So all the questions about, if it's a question about a B2 application, go to OND, biosimilars, go to the biosimilars program.
Nice and close. Microphone number 2. Go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation so far. So had a clarification question on distinction between controlled correspondence versus product development meetings. So in there, you talked about if you're challenging bioequivalence criteria or proposing alternate bioequivalence criteria, then it may be acceptable for a product development meeting. But I guess I'm curious if there are
A little closer.
if there are particular in vitro sameness tests required or suggested by the agency. If you would like to propose alternate tests to those, what would be the appropriate forum to?
So if you're proposing an alternate studies that are within the same class, so for instance within the same in vitro, then you would go the control correspondent. You could go the control correspondence route, and it would be considered a complex control correspondence, which would get a 120-day turnaround time.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
I believe so.
Okay.
And if you are proposing to not do particular tests that are prescribed within the guidance,
Then you should come in as a meeting request.
okay. Thank you very much.
With your justification.
Of course. Thank you.
Online question, please.
Another question that came in once our panel started answering questions. Can complex generic products differ in labeling compared to the RLD, specifically in terms of more robust storage conditions?
And there's not, the complex products have to follow the same labeling rules as all other ANDAs, and so there are allowable differences and not allowable differences, and generally those are a review issue, and you have to ask the specific question about a specific product.
Okay, if there's any other questions in the room, come on up to the microphone, but let's go to another online question, please.
If we already have had a pre-ANDA meeting before the new policy, does that qualify, or shall we have another meeting before going straight to the mid-cycle review?
So I think, let me rephrase this a little bit to make sure I have this correct. So if you've already had a pre-ANDA meeting before GDUFA 2 in the GDUFA 1, under GDUFA 1, if you've had one within the last 3 years of GDUFA 1, you will still qualify for the program and will get a mid-cycle review meeting. I hope that answered that person's question.
It was an online question, so yes.
Okay.
All right, another online question, please.
Is the portal only for complex meeting requests, or can we use for any pre-ANDA meeting?
So the portal will actually allow you to submit a meeting request for a non-complex product, but I would caution you to do so because the program is really intended to be for complex products. There may be some very specific situations where a non-complex product is very complicated and you feel that a meeting is the best way to get your questions addressed, and there's nothing to preclude you from submitting through the portal a meeting request for a non-complex product.
Okay. Other online question, please.
Can the DMF holders also use this portal for controlled correspondence?
Say that one. Your mic wasn't quite on yet.
No.
That was a nice definitive no. Thank you very much.
Clarify that a little bit. Like,
sorry.
It's
right.
less definitive.
All right, so a DMF holder can submit a control correspondence about something. You know, if you have a question related to your DMF or your application, you should go through your application content. Right, so you should generally be asking. If you have an application that's approved or under review, generally the pre-application process is not the right place to ask questions about that. Right, so hypothetically, if you were a DMF, potential DMF applicant, and you had a question about a specific thing, then you could use the control correspondence, right? OPQ colleagues answer lots of questions about control correspondence about generic drug development. So you can submit a control correspondence related to a drug substance issue.
Just a reminder that control correspondence are not currently done through the portal, but they will be in the near future.
All right, we've got a few minutes left. If there's any questions in the room, come on up to the mic. But let's do 2 more online questions, please.
Is there a list for complex products?
There's no list. I encourage you to look at the GDUFA 2 commitment letter and through the presentations that have shown tables and or lists of describing what complex products are, and use that to determine use those criteria to determine if your product is complex or not.
Okay, 1 more online question, please.
If I have failed multiple times for Q1, Q2 through controlled correspondence process, can this be submitted for pre-ANDA meetings for a simple injectable dosage form?
If you can identify the way in which this particular product is so unique and appropriate, that would be an example where it may be appropriate to submit a meeting request on that topic, but you really want to identify that there's something about this particular product that is so unusual that it is not appropriately addressed through the simple control correspondence process. So that is a recourse if you haven't been able to. That is a potential recourse if you have reached the point where there's just something that's just not comprehensible. But it would then be up to FDA to determine whether that topic was appropriate for a meeting. So, but you would really, in that question, have to really provide a very strong justification for why you would need a meeting and the evidence that you have that there's something completely unusual about this product. So you'd have to provide some reason for us to meet with you around that topic, and that could be the analysis you've done of the reference product and identifying what the issue is that's not resolvable through a control correspondence pathway.
Okay, and for our last question for the panel, please, nice and close to the microphone.
Sure. Good morning. Thank you so much for your presentations. You all shared information about the number of pre-meeting requests that have been granted and those that haven't. So you said about 60 requests in total. I just wanted to understand, is that considered high volume or for this year, or is that typical?
So the number that we're getting, the number of meeting requests that we're getting in GDUFA 2 year 1 is approximately 3 times that of what we received in GDUFA 1, if that gives you a reference point.
Thank you.
Okay. Any closing thoughts based on the questions that you heard from the panel?
Thing that I'd like to mention when submitting your agenda for your pre-ANDA meeting, that you do not submit any new. I just want to re-clarify that you should not be submitting any new information at that point, and no new questions, and that information will not be considered during the meeting.
Okay, and with that, please help me thank our panel for following up all those questions. And I'm going to go ahead and ask the panel to exit, take a deep breath, get a drink of water.